Welcome to Working Man Investor. On this channel, I discuss the economic environment and the steps people can take to protect themselves and their family's financial future. Today's episode is going to be on the Cantillon Effect. The Cantillon Effect is one of the most important economic laws for you to understand. Once you comprehend the Cantillon Effect, it will allow you to see clearly through much of the misinformation that is out there. You will understand why good manufacturing jobs have left the United States and why they're not coming back. You're going to understand why new money entering the system is so important, and you will understand what truly causes inflation. So what is the Cantillon Effect, and where does it come from? The Cantillon Effect is named for Richard Cantillon, who was an Irish-French economist. He was born in 1680, and he died in 1734. He is the author of the essay, The Nature of Trade. Cantillon's essay is considered the first complete article on economics, with numerous contributions to the science. These contributions include his cause and effect methodology, monetary theories, his concept of the entrepreneur as the risk bearer. Cantillon's essay has had significant influence on the early development of the political economy, including the works of Adam Smith, who many people even today consider to be the father of economics. So if you want to read the Cantillon Effect, which I suggest you do, you can buy a copy of the book on Amazon, an essay on economic theory by Richard Cantillon, but that'll cost you about $70. It's fairly expensive, so I recommend going to the Mises Institution, where you can download a copy for free. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go over his book. It's a three-part book. The part that I think most important is part 2, chapters 6, 7, and 8. I'm going to do a playlist here of multiple videos. And I'm going to start with chapter 6. I will explain in layman terms what he was seeing in the 1700s when he was writing his essay and compare it to the United States today. As I do this, I think it'll clarify for you how our economy has changed so much from what was once a manufacturing powerhouse to today a service industry. So while I break down the Cantillon Effect, it's important to understand that he was studying this in the 1700s. And back then, there was no Federal Reserve and U.S. Treasury to simply print money and inject it into the local economy. During his time, for a city or state to have a large windfall of new money coming into the system, it was through the discovery of a gold and silver mine. He's watching this gold mine get discovered, silver mine get discovered, and the mining take place, and the money coming out of there and going right into his economy and the changes within the economy. So in his essay, he describes the mechanics of money and money creation and how it affects the economy. Cantillon observed that when new money entered the system, it doesn't do it evenly. It starts with the people close to the new money, in this case the miners, the owners, the smelters, the refiners. When these people get this access to the money, they do what most people do when they get a new large windfall of money. They go out and they spend it. This was the 1700s, as I've stated, so back then they spent it on luxury items that was of the time. It could be more meat, it could be better meat like a steak, it could be beer, it could be an upgrade from beer to wine. They started wearing better clothes and finer linens. All the desirable goods of the 1700s is what these people with first access to the money were spending the money on. Is this spending of the money literally just taken from the mine? What it does then is it causes a chain reaction within the economy that helps the people closest to the money and hurts people farthest away from the money. So you got this mine that's just discovered. You got these miners, the mine owners, the smelters, the refiners. The miners go in and they start pulling out this gold and silver. Gold and silver is what's used for money at this time. So these people now have first access to this money. They're entering the marketplace. As they enter the marketplace, the prices of the market have not started to rise yet because the new money is not entering. So these people that have first access to the new money are getting to buy all these goods at the current price level. But as they're buying them, they're increasing demand while reducing supply. What does that do? Price starts to rise. So that's what Cantillon is witnessing here. As the people who are close to the money start purchasing goods from the market, they're just now starting to buy it. They are increasing demand and reducing the supply of them. This not only gets prices to start to rise, but it puts the new money into the hands of another group of people, which is the entrepreneurs and the artisans at the market, the inn owners that are in the taverns that are selling the food and the beer, the wine. They've never had this type of money either, so they're getting a windfall. So what do? They do what all the miners and the smelters and the refiners do. They start to spend it now. So mine discovered, all the people that work in the mine come out of the mine. They got all this new money and they're dumping it right in the laps of these tradesmen and the artisans. So now they're spending it. So now you got two groups of sending money through the economy. While this money moves through the economy and prices start to rise, the people who are getting hurt are the property owners during the times of the lease, their domestic service, and everybody on fixed wages. So leases like we have today are not a new concept. 1700s, they had leases. You sign a contract with somebody, I will rent such and such for you at such and such a rate and will not renegotiate raising the rates until such and such a date. So these landowners are getting hurt because everything's starting to go up, but they're under a lease at the old price. So they're getting paid what they're getting paid. Now the people that work under these property owners, they can't have a raise because their bosses, the property owners, haven't gotten a raise. And in the meantime, everybody else that's on a fixed income, they're getting absolutely crushed by these raise in prices. Does this sound familiar? The pandemic, 2020, all this new money came into the system through stimulus checks, and prices started to go up. You're now starting to see unions forming in places I never thought as a kid would. I never thought Starbucks would unionize, and all of these, and Amazon's unionizing. Unions are going on strike. This is a result of prices shooting up over the past 5 years. The new money came into the system through stimulus and severing the supply line too, which is a whole nother video. I don't want to get off of topic on my tyrant. So back to this. Once the leases are up, the property owners raise the terms of the lease. They will then give raises to their workmen and domestic service. However, by this time, the prices in goods have gone up so much that the raise is really no benefit for them. It doesn't help. Yeah, you're making more money, but everything else is so expensive. Cantillon went on to observe that if the new money continued to be extracted from the mines, the abundance of money will increase prices to such a point that not only will the property owners raise rents considerably, but the artisan and the workman will increase the prices of the articles they produce so high that there will be considerable gains in buying them from foreigners who make them much cheaper. So the artisans and the workmen in the marketplace, all their raw materials for whatever they're making are going up in price. Everything that they want to buy is going up in price because you got this money that just keeps coming out of the mine and being dumped into the local economy. So they in turn have to start to raise their prices because they have to cover their cost of their raw materials, and they got to be paid properly for their time and effort to keep up with the new going rate of everything to maintain their standard of living. Because of this, foreign states, foreign countries see an opportunity to start producing stuff and bringing it into this marketplace and selling it cheaper and undercutting the domestic manufacturing and artisans. So what he noticed was that as this new money kept pumping out of the mine into the market, prices kept rising. This forced people to start looking for cheaper items to spend their money on. The domestic manufacturers and artisans couldn't do it cheaply within the state because everything within the state was so expensive. They had to raise their prices, like I was saying, to try to keep up with the demand and to make the time worth their time. This then opened the window for the foreign producers to start entering the state because they lived in a land where the cost of living was lower, or as Cantillon called it, money was more scarce. These foreign workers can make the products for less money because they need less to live on. Since the products are cheaper to make, they can be sold for less. Now that you have these cheaper products competing in the marketplace with the more expensively domestically produced products, everyone is buying the cheaper ones, and the domestic artisans and manufacturers cannot keep up, and they go under. So you got this foreign country. They're looking at this domestic state that has this windfall of money keep coming in through this mine, and they can produce something with their workforce for, say, and I'm making this up, a silver coin and a half a day because their standard of living is cheaper. Over in the domestic state, it costs 3 silver coins to produce the same product that this foreigner can do for a coin and a half, silver coin and a half. So because he's producing it cheaper, he can now go into the domestic market and sell it cheaper. The product's just as close to as good. So what does all this new money do? They start buying the cheaper product because nobody wants to buy the more expensive product. Now the domestic manufacturing goes under. Very, very, very similar to the United States. I'm going to break this down more in a second video, but that's very similar to what's happened in the United States today. Our standard of living has risen to the point to where we're not a manufacturing hub anymore because we can't compete with the Mexicos of the world. Again, that's another video. I want to stay on topic here. Once this happens, the money produced by the mines will go abroad to pay for the imports. This will gradually impoverish the state and make it dependent on foreigners to whom it is obligated to send money every year as it is extracted from the mines. This great circulation of money, which was once widespread throughout the domestic economy, now ceases, and poverty and misery follow. So the domestic state loses its domestic manufacturing because its cost of living has risen so high they cannot produce it cheap enough to sell it at a competitive price. So basically everything that's coming out of that mine, gold, silver, is going across seas or state to this foreign nation. Once that mine runs dry and there's no new money coming into this domestic economy, poverty and misery takes place. Everybody goes broke. Again, sound familiar? Sounds what's happening here in the United States? This thing is gradual. This doesn't happen overnight. So, this is the Cantillon Effect. The people closer to the money get the advantage of this new money because they get to spend it before prices have risen. The further you are away from this new money, the less of an advantage you have, but it can actually hurt you financially. So, how can it hurt you financially? Well, it hurts you financially because any of the old money that you have. Now, by old money, I want you to think about money you have saved. Any old money that you have, it's going to start losing purchasing power over time as it sits there. So you've got your 8-month emergency fund or whatever sitting in a bank. In the meantime, all these prices are going up. That emergency fund is losing purchasing power, even if you're getting interest on it. Think back to the pandemic. When the pandemic broke out and we had runaway inflation here in the United States, you may have had some 8-month emergency fund in a savings account, but it was getting 1% interest at that time because the Fed hadn't raised interest rates. So it's getting 1% interest, but inflation's running hot. It's running 7-8%. So you take that 1% and you minus whatever the inflation rate, for this example, we'll say 7%, you're minus 6%. So you're losing purchasing power on that. On top of that, if you're on a fixed wage, which most middle class and lower class poor people are, you will not get access to the new money quickly. This is what I said earlier in the video. You're just now seeing here the making of this video, February 2025, within the last, 6 months, year, this rise of unions and these strikes and people's fighting to get a raise. In the meantime, inflation's eaten us up for 4 years. So you don't get access to money, but we've all been having to pay these same prices for the past 4 or 5 years. A lot of people have spent their savings. They haven't been getting a raise, and they're going to eventually start to get a raise this year, next year. But prices aren't coming down. Everything's already expensive. And if you're one of the unfortunate people that had to wipe your emergency fund out just to survive, that's gone. That's depleted. So now, you're getting a raise, but everything's more expensive, and your savings account is gone. You're in a horrible situation. So here again, he just goes on to say, the ones closest to the money get the advantage of that new money at the expense of the people who are further away from the new money, and the wealth of the people further away from the new money gets transferred over to those close to the new money. Yeah, say that fast 5 times. So, okay, now let's take a minute here, and I don't want to go too deep in this. I'm going to cut this video short. I'm going to do other ones going deeper in this. But I want to look into the United States here a little bit. A discovery of a gold mine is not going to create a windfall for the entire country. Not today. Those days are over. However, we do have the Federal Reserve and the U.S. Treasury. They have the ability to create money out of thin air and inject it into the economy. That's new money when they create it. They did it during the pandemic. Everybody got a stimulus check. We're not done getting stimulus checks. We'll get more. We're all going to see more of it. They're going to have to do it at some point. But anyways, we have several examples of the Fed injecting money into the economy, not just the stimulus checks we all got during the pandemic when they shut everything down. Think of the financial crisis of 2008. They did quantitative easing, or QE, as you may have remembered it by, in 2008 through 2014. During the 6-year run, they created $5 trillion. Now, I'm just going to be quick here on breaking down how QE works. I do not want this to turn into a QE video. I'll do my own video strictly on QE, but it's important to mention this so you understand how this new money came into the system. Okay, so how did the Fed and Treasury do QE? Well, they did it by the Federal Reserve buying U.S. Treasuries and mortgage-backed securities directly from commercial banks, the J.P. Morgans, Chases, the Bear Stearns of the world. When the Fed purchases this, they deposited the money directly into the commercial bank's account with the Fed. So every bank has an account with the Federal Reserve. So the commercial banks would sell them U.S. Treasury and mortgage-backed securities. The Fed would buy it off of the open market and give the money right to the bank in the reserve account with the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve's theory and belief is that the banks was going to take this brand new money that they just got for selling these treasuries that was just created out of thin air and use it to loan out to businesses. These businesses would then take this loan and invest it into their company. They would create jobs. They would build warehouses. They would research and development. They would create employment. That's not what happened. Instead, what happened is the businesses, they took these loans from the bank. These were very low interest rates because another thing the Fed did during the great financial crisis of 2008, they cut the federal funds rate down to zero. The federal funds rate is the rate that banks charge each bank for loans overnight. So these loans are cheap. They wanted people to be incentivized to borrow the money. This isn't what happened. Instead, what happened was businesses took the money and they used it to buy back their stocks. This in turn made the CEOs more money and any investor that had stocks in this company. And also think about any wealthy individual that had money on the sidelines that figured out that this was going on, that the Federal Reserve was doing quantitative easing, putting up all this new money, giving it to banks for loaning it to big business, and big business was buying back the stock. If you were wealthy at this time and you had, a couple million sitting around, what are you going to do? You're going to start buying stocks in the stock market. And now you're profiting off this new money too. Meanwhile, the average person, the unemployment's at 9.4, 8%, pushing 10%. A lot of people aren't working. The part that is, which is still the majority, but they're all scared that they're going to lose their job. They're not using money to invest. They're hoarding it. I don't have statistics to back this, but I'm sure that there were people that panicked, and maybe some of the viewers here have known somebody, went into their 401ks and took the money out and then just paid the penalty. So as the market started to go back up, they didn't reap the benefit of that. So we had, I don't remember the exact statistics, but I know at one point we had unemployment at 9.4% and the Dow Jones was starting to reach record highs again. The average person wasn't reaping those benefits. Those that had access to the new money did. The last thing I want to share with you here, and then I'm going to wrap this video up here, is this was just an interesting thing I came across in a book I read. Richard Fisher, at the time he was the Dallas Fed president, he was going around and talking to people about the quantitative easing and whether or not it was working. So Fisher said that he had recently spoken to the chief financial officer of the Texas Instrument, who explained how the company was managing money in the age of quantitative easing. The company had just borrowed $1.5 billion in cheap debt, but it had zero plans to use that cash to build a factory, invest in research, or hire workers. Instead, this guy actually told Richard Fisher the company used the money to buy back shares of its own stock. So Fisher then went on to say, I think that this was a huge issue. We worked under the assumption that lowering the cost of capital, lowering the Fed funds rate, and providing cheap money, quantitative easing, to the banks, and then the banks would then would loan this cheap money out to the businesses, the businesses would then level up and use that to create jobs. It did not happen. That is the Cantillon Effect. So that's the first video. I'm going to cut it there. I'm at 22 minutes. If you're confused, don't worry about it. It took me a while to wrap my head around the Cantillon Effect too, so I'll do other videos and I'll discuss it a lot. But once you start to think about this and think about how when new money enters the system, how it's going to affect you and how it's going to make other people wealthy, you'll be able to start to strategize better what to do with your finances. So, working man investor, keep grinding.